Today, we are taking the scalpel to one of the most painful and, I think, persistent psychological patterns we see in relationships.
Oh, absolutely. The self-destruct button.
The self-destruct button,
Right.
exactly. I mean, if you've ever been just baffled by why a seemingly good, healthy relationship suddenly hits a wall and just implodes, this deep dive is essential listening for you.
It really is. Our sources today are focusing on a very specific dynamic where internal insecurity, often fueled by past emotional wounds, it just acts as this invisible barrier to happiness.
Right.
We're really zeroing in on the behavior patterns of, well, the sources call her the anxious woman, someone who has accumulated a lot of trauma and disappointment from men in the past, and we're going to look at how she unintentionally pushes good partners away.
And look, this isn't about finger pointing. It's about gaining some radical insight. We're exploring that deep unconscious script that can turn positive potential into a devastating self-fulfilling prophecy. And I promise you, if you stick with us through this entire deep dive, you are going to gain some crucial, really actionable insight into the dynamics of male-female interaction. You'll learn exactly why the relationship you're trying to build might be fighting a losing battle with the relationship you're trying to escape.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with that core psychological blueprint that really sets this whole tragic cycle in motion.
So the foundation of the problem is all about internal instability. Even when the current partner is, reliable, kind, trustworthy, the anxious individual fundamentally lacks what our sources define as internal stability data.
Stability data, that's such a helpful concept.
It's this idea that they have no deep-seated proof, nothing internalized over time that tells them good things can last and that they are fundamentally safe.
So it's not about logic at all.
Yeah.
She can logically know he hasn't done anything wrong. But her emotional operating system is just. It's corrupted. It's running on this old, painful default setting that screams, trust leads to abandonment.
That's it. And when that core data is missing, the brain defaults to hypervigilance, to skepticism. This drives a constant, almost invasive internal dialogue. Our sources point to three really crucial internal questions or statements that just run continuously in the background.
Okay, let's break those down because they really sound like the engine of this whole destructive machine.
Well, the first one is this immediate rejection of any present joy. It's the question, should I be this happy?
Wow.
Yeah. In this context, happiness feels terrifyingly temporary. It's like the calm before a storm. The brain treats a positive emotion not as a reward, but as a heightened risk indicator.
So the moment of connection, that moment of genuine joy, it becomes an immediate cue for anxiety. The internal warning system is just blaring. This isn't sustainable. The fall is going to be painful.
Precisely. Which leads to the second thought, the generalization of past trauma. Men still can't be trusted. This statement just overlays all her past wounds onto the current partner no matter what he does. He's no longer an individual. He's just a representative of everyone who ever hurt her before.
And why is that generalization so powerful? I mean, doesn't the conscious mind somewhere in there recognize that this new person is different?
The unconscious doesn't really differentiate. It's all about confirmation bias. If one man left, the script dictates that all men will eventually leave. It's a survival mechanism, honed by trauma. It's trying to protect her from future pain by just assuming the worst right now.
And that leads to the third one, which you said is the most tragic.
It is. It's this internal impulse. You're going to leave me anyway, right? Confirm it quickly.
Wow. That isn't seeking reassurance. That's desperately seeking certainty, even if the certainty is painful. It's like an impulse control breakdown.
It is. It's the desire to end the intolerable state of uncertainty. The script says, the ending is inevitable, so let's just skip the painful waiting and get straight to the abandonment I know is coming.
And that's fueled by this intense discomfort.
Immense discomfort. Even after a wonderful date, the moment she gets home alone, that script just activates.
Like that for long. You have to find some kind of external resolution to that internal chaos.
It's a pressure release valve. It has to go somewhere.
And that's the jump point, right? Moving from thought into destructive action. And this is where it gets really interesting because that unbearable emotional pressure translates directly into these two outward urges that just poison the dynamic. Overwhelming urge to test the partner and this rising comparison mentality. The partner is now constantly auditioning for a role he thought he already had.
That testing, it's the active process of seeking the flaw, the rupture you anticipate. The test isn't to see if he loves her. It's to see if he's finally going to reveal that untrustworthy flaw that her internal script just knows is there.
Okay, let's get into the weeds here. If you're listening and recognizing this pattern in your own life, or maybe in your partners. What do these tests actually look like?
Right.
We need some concrete examples.
Oh, they're repetitive. They're disruptive actions that target the partner's stability and patience. It might be asking a meaningless, convoluted question like, if I gained 50 pounds, would you still find me attractive, but only if we were trapped on a deserted island?
Right, a question designed to corner him.
To force a wrong answer, or at least force him to spend a huge amount of emotional energy justifying his commitment.
Or it can manifest as just actively starting fights unnecessarily.
And another common test is provoking jealousy. This isn't always blatant, like flirting with someone else. Sometimes it's just subtle comments designed to make the man feel insecure.
Hoping his strong defensive reaction will prove his passionate commitment.
Yes, but the irony is just staggering. All of these behaviors, the testing, the fighting, the jealousy games, they are desperate attempts to confirm the connection is stable enough to survive her worst fears.
She is seeking stability by actively creating relationship instability.
And that need to find the flaw is so powerful that for some people with deep trauma, conflicts can actually feel safer than peace. Peace is suspicious. Peace was always followed by abandonment in the past. Conflict, while it's painful, is familiar. It's validation. This is what a relationship feels like according to her blueprint.
That is profound. The moment the water is calm, she feels compelled to throw a stone just to check if the ripples still appear. And this brings us directly into how this constant testing fundamentally reshapes the entire relationship.
Right. When the testing becomes the norm, you get this massive, unsustainable energy imbalance. This is the unbalanced relationship dynamic.
So how does that power, that emotional labor, actually shift?
Well, a lopsided structure is created where the anxious individual is forced by her own fear to invest more, verify more, and react more intensely than her partner. She's the one constantly chasing reassurance, constantly checking the relationship's pulse.
She's basically forcing herself to do the work of two people just to manage her own anxiety.
Exactly. The burden isn't placed on her by the man. It's placed on her by her own internal need for constant verification.
And what's the consequence for the partner in all this?
Meanwhile, the partner just gradually becomes completely exhausted. Imagine the emotional toll. Every interaction requires scrutiny. Every reassurance is followed by a new, escalating demand for proof.
Yeah.
The sources describe him as just becoming weary of this constant interaction and emotional demand.
It's like her anxious actions treat his emotional capacity as an infinite resource, like a phone that needs to be charging 24/7, but that battery runs out. The relationship shifts from being about mutual enjoyment to just being pure, draining, emotional labor. He goes from being a lover to a full-time, unpaid therapist who is constantly failing these impossible tests.
And burnout is inevitable. The man simply gets tired of the cycle. He recognizes that every time he solves one problem, she instantly creates a new, often larger one. The goalposts just keep moving, so he starts to emotionally withdraw because the relationship isn't a source of joy anymore. It's just a demanding source of stress.
And that leads us to the moment where the internal prophecy is finally, tragically proven right. Section 4, the tragic proof.
The partner eventually decides he just can't do it anymore. He flees. And what's particularly heartbreaking is that because the demands were so high and often felt so irrational from his perspective, the man often treats her like a crazy person as he makes his escape.
He doesn't understand the trauma behind it.
Not at all. He just knows he's running for his emotional life.
And the woman, instead of gaining any insight from this, she interprets his escape as absolute proof of her original painful belief. See? I told you so. Men eventually leave. The trauma script is validated, it's reinforced, and it's cemented for the next relationship.
And that is the core tragedy. She often doesn't realize that she destroyed the relationship with her own hands. She mistook his emotional exhaustion for intentional malice or a fundamental flaw in him. The whole thing is just an act of self-destruction.
A process where her unconscious actively worked to manufacture the exact painful outcome she carried inside her.
It's a vicious loop. The anxiety pushes away the very partner who offers stability, just so the internal system can maintain the integrity of its traumatic worldview. The relationship wasn't broken by him. It was broken by her own internal machinery.
What's so fascinating there is that complete separation between the actual problem and the perceived problem. The problem is explicitly not that the man was bad or that she chose poorly. The problem was that her internal process required an external failure to confirm her deep-seated belief that she was unsafe and unworthy.
And if that's the true engine of destruction, then simply finding a better man is doomed to fail.
Right. The next partner will just face the exact same tests until he, too, reaches burnout. It just guarantees a repetition of, as the source says, endless wounds and destruction.
Precisely. The cycle continues until the person gains insight into what's really happening. The danger of remaining ignorant of this pattern is absolute relational failure.
Okay, so what does this all mean for someone who might be caught in this cycle? If you can't outsource your stability to a partner, and the problem is fundamentally internal, where does the change even begin? What's the first step?
The critical first step, according to this analysis, is it's about radical self-responsibility and an internal focus. Change does not begin by finding a different, more patient partner. It begins by looking deeply into one's own heart and mind and initiating a conscious, deliberate dialogue with the self.
But how do you start that dialogue when that anxious voice is so loud? I mean, it's easy to say talk to yourself, but what are the actual mechanics of that?
You need to start building that missing stability data from scratch. So
Yeah.
the first mechanical step is to just track the script. When you feel that intense surge of uneasiness, that urge to test, you have to pause and name the internal statement. Which of those three questions is running the show right now?
Naming the emotion instead of just acting on the impulse.
Yes. And then you have to introduce counter evidence. The self-dialogue becomes, okay, my anxiety is telling me X, but what are the present facts? The stability data is built not by asking your partner for reassurance, but by pausing your own impulse and finding the stability within the present reality.
You have to recognize, I'm not acting this way because of him. I'm acting this way because of my 10-year-old self's trauma.
That internal conversation, that's where you interrupt the feedback loop. You shift the relationship from being a trauma-based reaction to a reality-based response.
And that's where stability is finally built.
That is where it's built. By understanding that the breakdown was a process of your own making, fueled by an unconscious desire for predictable pain, you take back the power to start it. That self-dialogue is really the only way to rewrite the unconscious script and finally allow true connection to flourish.
That's some powerful and, I think, very necessary insight. We've looked at this devastating cycle where internal insecurity dictates external results, showing precisely how anxiety can manufacture the very abandonment it fears.
It's the deepest form of relational irony, really, proving the trauma right at the expense of potential happiness.
It really is. And this raises an important question for you, the listener, to take with you. If true relationship stability hinges entirely on cultivating that internal stability data, on having that self-dialogue, and fact-checking your anxious thoughts, what concrete steps can you commit to today to challenge that destructive, self-sabotaging script?
Because the relationships you keep in the future, they depend entirely on the conversation you start with yourself and the compassion you show to your own past wounds right now.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.